break-even equation and break-even point. So we are now on the part in chapter 4, buying and selling, where we shall speak about break-even analysis. What does it mean when a business or a company is operating at break-even, okay, or they are operating at the break-even point? A business is at break-even when cost equals revenue, when their profit is zero, the business is neither earning profit nor incurring loss. So these statements are all the same. They mean the same thing. They are equivalent statements. Being at break-even has a geometric interpretation. So let's say, for example, the blue curve is the curve that describes the revenue function of a company. The green curve is the curve for the cost function of the company. So these two curves are different. They describe different things. The revenue function tells you the revenue, and the cost function tells you the cost of producing goods. So they are distinct functions, but at the break-even point, they are equal. And the break-even point here is point A. And how do we interpret point A? At point A, the company produced and sold A units of goods, but the profit that it earned for the business is zero. The business earned no profit, and at the same time, the business also incurred no losses. So at the break-even point, the revenue function is equal to the cost function. And so that basically is the standard problem in break-even analysis. Find the break-even point. Find the quantity of goods that must be sold. Find the quantity of goods that must be produced and sold so that the company is at the break-even point. So example 4.15, find the break-even point for a printing business. The daily cost in pesos for a printing press to produce X quantity of the local tabloid is this. C of X is equal to 3.5 times X plus 1,200. So the cost function is in terms of pesos. The selling price for each tabloid is 7 pesos. Write the revenue function. Write the break-even equation. How many pieces of the local tabloid must the printing press produce and sell? Okay, I think I should have written there, produce and sell to achieve the break-even point. So the revenue function. So the revenue function is equal to the price per tabloid times the number of tabloids that is sold. So that is just 7 times X. Okay? R of X is equal to 7 times X. That is the revenue function. The break-even equation. Okay? So the break-even equation is cost function is equal to the revenue function. So our cost function is equal to 3.5X. 3.5 times X plus 1,200. The revenue function is 7 times X. Okay? So we can write it in this way, and that is equivalent to this. Let us see. We can write it in this way. Okay, so that is combining similar terms. That is your break-even equation. Now, let us get the break-even point. So the break-even point is the solution to the break-even equation. When is the break-even equation true? What is the value of X such that 3.5 times X is equal to 1,200. So we shall solve the break-even equation. And it is equal to this. X is equal to 342.86. But you must round it to the nearest whole number, 343. Okay, because the tabloids, okay, so these are newspapers. This is a discrete random variable. So these are random variables whose quantity comes as whole numbers. Okay, so you have 10 tabloids, 200 tabloids, 242. You don't say 243.3. Okay, so discrete random variables are random variables that appear or whose quantity comes as whole numbers. So you must round it to the nearest whole number, which is 343. Now, this is our graphical interpretation of this problem. You have the revenue function, which is R of X is equal to 7 times X. The cost function is defined by C of X is equal to 3.5 times X plus 1,200. So the break-even point is where the business is at break-even. And so that is the point of intersection between the revenue function and the cost function. Exercise 4.8, revenue, cost, and profit for a printing press. A calendar printing company releases the following information about their business. The selling price per calendar is 150 pesos. The variable cost per calendar is 40 pesos. Fixed cost per month is 12,000 pesos. Write down the cost function. Write down the revenue function. Write down the profit function. And find the break-even point per month for the company. Let us begin with the cost function. So the cost function is equal to the variable cost per calendar times the quantity of calendar that is printed plus the fixed cost. Or it is equal to the variable cost plus the fixed cost. Okay? The cost function is equal to the variable cost per calendar times X, the number of calendars to be printed, plus the fixed cost, which is 12,000 pesos. How about the revenue function? The revenue function is the sales. So that is the price per calendar times the quantity of calendar that is sold. Okay? And so that is just equal to this. R of X is equal to 150 times X. Write the profit function. So the profit function is the revenue function minus the cost function. So be careful with how you write it. I wrote the cost function in such a way that it is inside the parentheses. So 150x minus the quantity 40 times x plus 12,000 pesos. You simplify it. Okay? So it becomes 110 times x minus, okay, 12,000 pesos. So pay attention to this, because many students get it wrong here. They will just write plus. It shouldn't be plus because this binomial is preceded by a subtraction. So it should be minus. The profit function is 110 times x minus 12,000 pesos. What about the break-even point? So the break-even point is the quantity of calendars such that the revenue from selling those calendars is equal to the cost of producing those calendars. That is the break-even point. And if the revenue function and the cost function are equal, that means the profit function is 0. So that is our interpretation of the break-even point. And so we will equate the profit function to 0 when is this equal to 0. Solve for x. X is equal to 109. 109.09 or 109 pieces of calendars.